No Country for Old Men is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I certainly won't deny that the incredible performance from Javier Bardem as Anton Chigurh absolutely and unequivocally steals the show. He is fucking awesome and perfectly portrays a true psychopath. But I think the true thematic brilliance of No Country for Old Men oftentimes gets overlooked amongst the incredible acting and awesome cinematography. So today I want to really analyze its key thematic narrative because I think it is truly fascinating. We begin No Country for Old Men with a monologue given by Sheriff Ed Tom, and his words here give us some great insight into what the entire film will thematically be about. He tells us, "It's not that I'm afraid of it. I always knew you had to be willing to die to even do this job, but I don't want to push my chips forward and go out and meet something I don't understand." And Ed Tom's words here really speak to the fact that he seeks to put himself into the mindset of the criminals he pursues. With the changing of the guard and the radical increase of heinous crimes being committed, this sheriff feels like he needs to understand the evil that he is up against in order to bring them to justice. And the entire film shows us this dynamic, because the three lead characters all represent a key portion of this equation, and we largely get a story about the hunter becoming the hunted, a clash between good and evil. Sheriff Ed Tom of course represents law and order, Llewellyn Moss represents a random citizen, and Anton Chigurh, well, Chigurh represents chaos and evil. He is the human embodiment of the cruel randomness of fate, the evolution of crime that this sheriff is attempting to keep up with. And thus, this movie is essentially a three-way chase. Llewellyn is trying to flee from his ultimate fate and escape with the money that he so happened to stumble upon. Anton is hot on Llewellyn's tail, hunting him down so he can retrieve the briefcase full of cash. And Ed Tom is simultaneously attempting to hunt down and arrest Chigurh. This movie beautifully gives us numerous moments where the sheriff essentially mirrors Anton's past actions. Most notably, this happens in Llewellyn's trailer after Moss has already fled with the money. When Anton breaks in, he grabs some milk from the fridge and sits back on the couch and thinks about his next move. And when Ed Tom arrives to the trailer shortly after, he grabs a glass from the shelf, sits down on the couch, and also drinks some milk. It's as if he's trying to put himself in Anton's shoes. Here we are precisely seeing what the sheriff was talking about in the opening voiceover. In a way, he's trying to understand this psychopathic killer so that he knows what he's up against, and exactly who or what he's hunting. As I mentioned previously, Llewellyn fits into this situation as a random citizen, because again, he just so happened to stumble upon this drug deal gone wrong, and he truly does embody an average, flawed civilian. He shows some greed through his decision to take the money in the first place, but he also shows glimpses of kindness, as he went back to the scene of the crime to bring water for the man that was still alive, a decision that turned out to be a grave mistake. And again, we get a nice parallel towards the start of the film, this time between Llewellyn and Anton. Llewellyn's story begins with him as a hunter, as we see him attempting to shoot some antelope with a rifle, but he importantly fails in his effort to kill any of these animals. And this is really nice foreshadowing of his ultimate fate, because his failure to successfully hunt down Anton would result in his untimely demise. And this first scene with Llewellyn of course begins his journey of going from the hunter to the hunted, because Anton is absolutely a hunter himself. A hunter of people, that is. Because while Llewellyn's story begins with him failing to kill an antelope, Anton's begins with him killing a man on the side of the road, allowing himself to be arrested, and then proceeding to kill the police officer who arrested him. It was as if he was trying to prove to himself that he could in fact escape custody. Anton Chigurh views people as cattle to be herd, and of course killed when necessary, which I think is reflected beautifully through Chigurh's weapon of choice. And when faced with the reality of his situation later in the film, Llewellyn, rather than deciding to meet his fate with open arms, chooses to attempt to hunt Chigurh and kill him first. Much like Sheriff Ed Tom, Llewellyn attempts to hunt down the hunter. And well, that goes pretty poorly for him as he is shot dead off screen. And thematically, I think the reason that Llewellyn fails in his attempt to reclaim his status as the hunter is because he is not willing to go to the same lengths as Chigurh, and he fails to fully comprehend exactly what he's up against. Llewellyn still has some human emotion and kindness within him, whereas Anton has stripped himself of these weaknesses, which is what makes him the true embodiment of chaos and evil. As I previously mentioned, Moss is a morally ambiguous man. He steals the money knowing what he risks by taking it, but he then gets himself identified as the thief because he returns to perform an act of kindness. Essentially, we see Llewellyn Moss waver on which side he falls on. Is he a good, God-fearing man, or is he willing to become fully and wholly evil in order to get himself out of this precarious situation? And this battle of good and evil also manifests between the sheriff and Anton. Ed Tom tries to catch up with Chigurh, but consistently remains a few steps behind, and shows up only in time to clean up after Anton and collect the dead bodies. And I'd argue that Sheriff Ed Tom's decision to retire at the end of the film also reflects his acceptance of the good inside of him. I think in seeing the evil that Chigurh was capable of, this sheriff made the choice to not stoop to his level. He saw the lengths that he would have to go to in order to outmaneuver this madman, and he decided that he didn't want to push his chips forward anymore. While he might have eventually been able to find and bring Anton to justice, what would it cost him to do so? The film also doesn't let Anton off the hook either though, because as I stated before, he is the embodiment of the cruel randomness of fate. He holds the belief that nobody can escape their destiny. He just so happens to be the harbinger of many people's fate, which is why he allows his victims to call a coin flip at times. In his eyes, if they can call the coin correctly, then as fate would have it, it's not their time to die yet. But in his final scene, Anton's fate catches up to him, as he gets hit and brutally injured by a driver who runs a red light. And while we don't know if this broken arm and other bodily injuries led to Chigurh being caught by authorities, I do think it's wildly fascinating that by his own psychopathic logic, being hit and injured by this car was his destiny. Call it karma or whatever else you'd like to, but the cruel randomness of fate struck back upon its harbinger in this scene. And the kicker of it all is that if Anton hadn't gone out of his way to track down and kill Carla Jean, then this accident wouldn't have happened to him. In this moment, I'd have to ask Anton, if the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule? All in all, I love this movie because rather than telling a conventional good versus evil narrative, where after a long struggle good ultimately prevails, it tells a far more complex story where the lines are a bit blurry. You could say that evil prevailed because Llewellyn was eventually killed and Ed Tom never caught the killer he was after. But you could also argue that Llewellyn Moss's fate was brought upon himself through his morally wrong actions throughout the film. And in a big picture sense, Ed Tom has the happiest ending out of all three lead characters. He got to retire and live the rest of his life with his wife, whereas Llewellyn got himself and his girl killed, and Anton ends up brutally maimed in a car accident. I'd venture to say that the one man who showed no evil within himself throughout the film is the best off. But it's largely up to you to create your own takeaway on what this movie is trying to say about this classic clash of good and evil. And I love movies that can make you think so deeply about its themes, while on the other hand also just being an awesome visual spectacle filled with good action, incredible cinematography, and actors who are clearly invested in giving every take their absolute highest effort. Simply put, No Country for Old Men is a cinematic masterpiece. Well, if you made it this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts on No Country for Old Men. Do you love it? Do you hate it? And what overall message do you take away from it? I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe for more Screen Stories content. I'll have a playlist with some other video essays linked in the description. Thank you for watching, and until next time, peace.